Hey there, good afternoon. 5:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, David Strom from Hot Air will be with us this hour. A lot to talk about with him, and we'll chat with you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joe Biden stumbles up the stairs to speak in Philadelphia. A headline in the Washington Examiner today. Yeah, there's footage going around the internet again of Joe Biden stumbling and bumbling upstairs. He falls upstairs, the president of the United States. I saw somebody point out that the most exhilarating moment in any Joe Biden speech is when he walks on stage just to see if he's going to make it. Yeah, so there's our illustrious president. Hey, election fraud is a thing. It really happens. A couple years back in North Carolina, there was a Republican congressional campaign where somebody who was working on behalf of the campaigns, I think it was a contractor, was involved in what turned out to be a ballot stuffing process. The Republican campaign was aided and abetted by voter fraud. This is well before 2020. Voter fraud, 2018, I believe. And it became, a big national story. Look at this, Republicans stealing the election. It got so crazy that they had to do a revote. They had to throw it back to the voters again because there was just too much fraud going on and it benefited a Republican. And it was, and of course the media took it very seriously because Republicans are trying to steal elections. But that's the kind of thing, if you were an honest Democrat, if you were honestly assessing all of this, you'd say, oh man, we can't let that happen again. We can't let that happen at all. We need in-person voting on the same day. Everybody votes on the same day. We need paper ballots. We need voter IDs. We need election integrity. That's what you would say if you were an honest person trying to ensure that our election system was secure. But of course, Democrats are not saying that these days. In fact, they want to make our election system as vulnerable as ever in the very same way that it was exploited when a Republican's campaign attempted to steal an election in North Carolina a couple years back. And now we have yet another saga that looks a lot like that, but this one involves two Democrats. Democrat primary in September for a mayoral position to become mayor of the town of Bridgeport, Connecticut, where the Democrats in this race are now accusing each other of stealing it. You thief, you cheated. And this is not legitimate. It's not on the up and up. This is coverage just overnight from WABC TV, ABC 7 out of New York City, on the latest in this melodrama between these Democrats in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and it includes footage of a ballot box being stuffed.
Connecticut began hearing testimony today in a case that is challenging the results of a primary race for the mayor of Bridgeport.
The case hinges on this video you're looking at right now. It appears to show two people shoving papers into an absentee ballot box.
Eyewitness News reporter Marcus Solis is live in Bridgeport this afternoon with the very latest. Marcus.
Well, listen, Dave, Bridgeport has certainly been home to political scandals and election fraud investigations in the past.
Wait, what?
This race is...
So, wait, you're saying this happens from time to time, or maybe a lot?
Especially close, a difference of just 250 votes. And the challenger says the only reason his opponent won is because illegal absentee ballots were stuffed in a box, and they say they have the video to prove it.
What does this guy think he is, Dinesh D'Souza? What is this, 2,000 Mules? This seems like a conspiracy theory. Footage, you say? I don't believe you.
This pre-produced video by the challenger is at the heart of a lawsuit and a state investigation. It shows a City Hall employee allegedly stuffing an absentee ballot box numerous times 1 week before last month's Democratic primary.
Yeah, at 5:42 in the morning, just to be clear. This is who's going to stuff ballots at 5:42 in the morning, and everything is on the up and up.
On election night, Bridgeport Mayor Joe Ganim was trailing his opponent by 487 votes.
We're not there yet. We're going to respect the process. We're going to give the officials the time to go through and make sure that every vote is counted.
The next morning, he declared victory after the absentee ballot count put him ahead by 251 votes.
Okay. So he goes to sleep that night. This is the incumbent mayor, is the Bridgeport mayor, Joe Ganim. He's trailing by 487 votes. And The next morning, by some miracle, oh, the absentee ballots came in. He's ahead by 251 now. I win. He declares victory.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to the voters, the residents.
The only way the other side was going to win was by stealing the election, and that's what they did. But thank God we have enough proof now to hopefully overturn the results.
Challenger John Gomes is suing to have the primary thrown out, hoping a judge will order a new primary. The alleged fraud took place in the early morning hours, captured by City Hall cameras. The video leaked to the Gomes campaign.
I do election cases all over the state. There's 169 cities and towns. This is the only city that has this type of problem.
This is Gomes' attorney who's speaking. I assume he's a Democrat, so maybe he's making excuses for other Democrat cities having voter fraud. But he goes, but in this one case where my client is losing the election right now, it's voter fraud.
Today, a police captain testified the city has turned over thousands of hours of security footage. Connecticut law does allow for designees to deposit ballots for ill residents, and lawyers hired by the administration
for ill residents, for sick people, designees. Somebody is too infirmed to make it to the polls, but would like to cast a ballot anyway. They can designate somebody. So apparently the town of Bridgeport, Connecticut has hundreds upon hundreds of hundreds, nearly 1,000 people who were all so sick that their ballots needed to be stuffed in the box by one lady.
Argue the video doesn't necessarily show election fraud.
This is a court of law, and smoke does not equal fire unless you can prove it.
Well, tomorrow, the woman in that video, a Democratic party operative, and the mayor himself, Joe Ganim, will be called to testify. Whether they will or will not remains in question. They may plead the fifth because this case also being investigated by the state Election Enforcement Commission.
All right, so that's the coverage out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. 2 Democrats and allegations of ballot box stuffing and voter fraud. Who would have thunk? Can you even imagine? You know, Jimmy Carter warned about all of this in the early 2000s. He was a part of, you remember Jimmy Carter? The man who's still alive. He's been in hospice for like a year and a half or something. Remember when the headlines came out? He's in hospice. Usually when somebody goes to hospice, you kind of think like, it's right away. It's, oh man, any moment now. He's been in hospice forever. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy theory. I don't know what's going on. But at this point, Carter's going to outlast Biden, don't you think? Do you think so? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't place that bet. I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen there. But, Godspeed either way. But Carter warned in the early 2000s that the only way you can have a safe election system is paper ballots, vote in person, same day, voter ID. Yeah, he warned about that. But nowadays, they don't want to talk to him. They put him in hospice, so you can't find out any more about this. And then in Pennsylvania, which has been the scene of so much drama in voting, remember when they decided to unconstitutionally change their state's voting laws and curing ballots and accepting ballots after Election Day and destroying ballots before anybody has a chance to audit them? Pennsylvania, they're home to Philadelphia. We've got an update out of their state. Out of the Keystone State, headline, Shapiro's new automatic voter registration is benefiting Republicans by a 2-to-1 margin. Selena Zito with a very interesting report today from the Washington Examiner. Dateline, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Sometimes political actions have unintended consequences. When Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a Montgomery County Democrat, that would be Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, not to be confused with the People's Republic of Montgomery County in Maryland, Montgomery County Democrat implemented a new measure that allowed residents getting driver's licenses and ID cards to be opted in to register to vote. Some Republican elected officials and conservatives weren't happy about it. State House Republican leader Brian Cutler, for example, complained that the measure was implemented without going through the legitimate legislative process. Quote, the governor is following the sad and misguided precedent set by his predecessor that recognizes our election laws need updating and modernized. That's a statement. But then disenfranchises the General Assembly from exercising its constitutional prerogative to make laws, Cutler said. So Cutler opposed on a reasonable ground, which is, hey, the legislature's supposed to do this. The governor can't just make this up as he goes along. Cutler said the unilateral action done ahead of the hotly contested off-year elections for county leaderships and the state Supreme Court will again cause many Pennsylvania voters to, quote, continue to question the security and results of our system. Conservative activists in the state said the measure was going to give an advantage to Democrats. Shapiro dismissed that. The governor, this is the Democrat, saying, I think what it's doing is giving our democracy an advantage, he said. We're not checking your registration. We don't care what your views are on issues, said Shapiro. Former Republican candidate for governor Charlie Garrow said in an interview that day he thought Republicans were getting ahead of their skis in their reaction. Quote, I actually think Republicans can benefit from this, he said. I think perhaps we should step back and look at this as an opportunity and not a disadvantage. It turns out, Selena Zito writes, Garrow was right. Just shy of 1 month into Shapiro's motor vehicle initiative, 3,194 Democrats, 4,052 independents, and a whopping 7,657 Republicans have registered so far. In short, twice as many Republicans registered in the state as Democrats, and even independent registration outpaced the Democrats by 1,000 votes. Erie County, the western part of the state, Erie County Republican State Senator Dan Laughlin said those numbers came from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, and he was pretty enthused that the numbers are starting to level out the playing field. This is amazing. This is so interesting. I wonder what's happening here. Maybe Josh Shapiro had bought into some notion that if you just randomly get everybody registered, it will work to the benefit of Democrats, but not so in Pennsylvania. As of October 10th, the Pennsylvania Department of State reports that, including both active and inactive voters, there are 446,467, so just under 500,000, more registered Democrats than Republicans. In July, those numbers had shown Democrats holding a 480,000 advantage, so nearly 40,000 votes more over Republicans. That was back in July. So those numbers are slipping big time for Democrats. Laughlin said he wonders if it's the Republicans' message resonating with voters or just the Biden backlash effect. My guess is the latter is a huge part of this. People are sick and tired of Biden. Quote, it's important to me that voters are aware and supportive of our positions. We as a party need to work on the issues that will make Pennsylvania a better place to live. It's pretty simple when you really boil it down to that. We need to make Pennsylvania more competitive for business. We need to make our streets safe to walk. We need a robust public education system. And on and on and on. So the Selena Zito's excellent reporting continues here, but a fascinating occurrence here. Josh Shapiro, the Democrat governor, says we're going to register everybody, motor voter laws, and it's worked to Republicans' advantage by a 2-to-1 margin. I'm looking forward to Josh Shapiro changing his mind. You know, democracy ain't all it's cracked up to be. Let's back off on this whole democracy thing. Who registers to vote when they go to the DMV anyway? That's so silly. Let's get rid of that. So we'll also see what the Republican state legislature is saying. Maybe they'll still hold on to the position that, you know, well, this is unconstitutional. But in the meantime, maybe they should just keep their mouths shut because it's working out for Republicans, which should be a big deal coming up next year in Pennsylvania because, you know, as always, Pennsylvania, a big deal state. A lot of shenanigans there, but if you can overwhelm the shenanigans with voters... Wait a second. Is this real? Kamala Harris was in Nevada yesterday? And she, oh my gosh, she's just being her again. In case you're wondering why Democrats are in such a panic over Joe Biden and his failed presidency, but don't know what to do beyond that. I heard, was it Chris Plant, I think, said that Kamala Harris is the backup quarterback, and that's a horrible position to be in. You don't want her on the field. Kamala Harris, you ready for some deep thoughts? Can we get some? Here's Kamala Harris in Nevada yesterday.
Don't hear no. I eat no for breakfast. Don't hear no. Always believe in what can be, unburdened by what has been.
Does she have anything else? Does she have any other material? Like, try something different. You've done that a million times. She's like, she just always repeats the same thing. You remember the show American Idol? Like in the early days, they had a guy appeared on screen called William Hung, and he was just a big joke because he kept singing that Ricky Martin song. She bangs, she bangs. He would just do that, and that was his whole shtick. over and over and over again. And eventually the joke's like, okay, all right, yeah, we've seen that a million times. Thank you. No more of that. Kamala Harris is kind of the William Hung of this administration. Burdened by what has been. And then she always has the hand gestures, like she's doing the Macarena. It's like built into how she's expressing herself when she does this ridiculous.
Always believe in what can be, unburdened by what has been.
She's like randomly gesturing to the side as if she's like doing magic spells. And you hear the crowd reaction. Nobody even knows what she's talking about. Like you could probably bring in a fleet of crickets to chirp and then listen to them. Kamala Harris, also at the College of Nevada, emphasized one of her great loves in life. It's when circles overlap each other.
So here's I think at this point a well-known secret about me. I love Venn diagrams. I love Venn diagrams, and whenever I am presented with kind of like this is complicated, I always wonder, is there a Venn diagram to figure this stuff out?
And we love that about you,
right?
Do we? Do we love that about her? Is that one of the things we love about? What is something you love about Kamala Harris? Is there anything? Can you name a thing? I can't even think of anything. I don't know. What do I love about Kamala? I guess this audio. That's what I love. I love how ridiculous. If she's going to be ridiculous, at least it's this cartoonish. I feel the same way about people like Hank Johnson, by the way. It's like you do need some freaks out there who are just like, who have really embraced it. They just let their freak flag fly. Like, yeah, sure, 100 people could tip over Guam if they all stand on the edge of the island. Sure, Hank Johnson. You whack job. You know, good old Eric Swalwell compromised by Fang Fang. If you're asking me what I like about these people, it's how weird they are and how much fun it is to mock them. That's the thing I like. Coming up, David Strom will be with us from Hot Air. He's keeping track of the weirdos. He's got an update for us. Well, good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 here on Newstalk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A lot of craziness going on across the country right now. University of Washington anti-Israel protests this week sounded like this. Intifada revolution. Over UCLA, it sounded like this. Intifada, attack Israel, in other words. And then you've got this last night in Washington, D.C., in front of the Jewish National Fund charity. From the river to the sea means get rid of Israel. A lot of, pro-terror sentiment this week in the United States. What is going on here? David Strom joins us now. He's an associate editor at Hot Air, and he's on the phone. Hello, David.
Hello, Vince. How are you?
Good. We have a wacky country, don't we?
We do, although I think it's confined mostly to the cultural and political elite in this country. I mean, if you look at who is out there doing this, these are the usual suspects. Unfortunately, the usual suspects now include pretty much every university administration out there, a large percentage of the students, a decent chunk of the mainstream media, and it's really kind of scary.
Yeah, it definitely is. Although, what's interesting about it is it's not just scary to you and I. We've been tracking this for a while. You kind of, we keep our eyes open. We know what the left is up to. But it is really jarring to some people on the left. I'm seeing today there was a report in the New York Times, one of their columnists, Michelle Goldberg. She wrote the following headline, "The Massacre in Israel and the Need for a Decent Left." And she writes that many progressive Jews have been profoundly shaken by the way that some on the left are treating the terrorist mass murder of civilians as noble acts of anti-colonial resistance. And she quotes a guy called Joshua Leifer. He's a contributing editor at the left-wing magazine Jewish Currents. And he says, quote, I think what surprised me most was the indifference to human suffering. Quote, I'm trying to hold on personally to my commitments and my values, which now feel in conflict in a way with the political community that I lived alongside in the United States for basically my whole adult life. It certainly has begun to feel like a breaking point. In other words, David, there are some lefties, specifically Jewish lefties by and large, who are looking at this and going, what is this party? I didn't know I was a part of this.
Well, it's really clarifying for a lot of people. This is one of the many reasons why censorship is such a bad idea. The people, the mainstream media is doing everything they can to do both sidesism. And then you look, there are a lot of people out there who are saying, well, what we have to do is clear out all this hate speech. But really, that's about maintaining an illusion. And it's good to see that the scales are dropping from the eyes of certain people who are, the sort of more traditional liberals. There are far too few of them. Too many of them are genuinely aligned with the left. This really should not be just about Jewish intellectuals. Everybody should be horrified by what happened. But the simple fact is, and you're right, you and I have been following this for a long time. I've spent a year at Hot Air writing about how this is the left. They're constantly telling us that they hate us. And liberals, I hope, will finally understand they've aligned themselves with, a hate group. The left is just one large hate group.
It's a total disappointment. It's sad for our country. It really is. But they're making common cause, all of these lefties across the country, in a very public and brazen way with the terrorists who attacked Israel last week. And it really should be a breaking point for everybody.
Yeah, well, when you look at it, Black Lives Matter, the prominent people in the alphabet ideology who, if they actually were in Gaza or on the West Bank, would get hanged immediately. You just go down the list of all the people who talk about decolonizing, the DEI ideology. And of course, critical race theory, anything that's got critical in front of it.
Yes.
They are part of this movement. They hate the West. And that pretty much includes you, me, and anybody out there who is not signed on to a Marxist ideology.
Well, we had a caller yesterday, a woman who said that, and I think there's something to this, that a lot of this is just racialized, that it comes down to white is bad, people of color good, and that Jewish people have been lumped in as white in this framework, and basically that the American left has filtered all of their judgments through that lens, and it's a very destructive and poisonous ideology.
Oh, that is absolutely true. And of course, it's ironic because Jews are, racially speaking, actually a fairly diverse group. There's a large number of Black Jews, the Lost Tribe, who were evacuated out of, I believe it was Ethiopia, by the Israelis. A lot of Israelis are Arab, both Muslim and Jewish. Ashkenazi Jews are European Jews. But it's actually a fairly racially diverse group united by a religion. But, for the left, they're white supremacists, just like, everyone else who's white, according to them. And when I tell people this really is just a version of Marxism, they think I'm nuts. But go look at who runs Hamas. It's a Politburo. They've got two ideologies that have been mixed together. One is sort of Islamism, but the other is Marxism. And you could probably throw in Nazism as well, and you go back, and when the Nazis were in power, the Islamists aligned themselves with the Nazis quite explicitly, up to and including embracing Hitler. And the Grand Mufti went and met with Hitler. And you go read Hamas. They talk about essentially the elimination, not just of Israel, but of the Jews.
Well, at some of I know that at least one of the pro-Hamas rallies this week here in the United States, I saw somebody was raising a cell phone with a picture of a swastika on it as a symbol of solidarity with a Nazi message. And it struck me as just an honest moment on the part of somebody who is overtaken by hate.
Well, and think about it. You and I certainly have, and I'm sure you have been called Nazis. But in fact, I mean, the left has aligned itself with some pretty explicitly Nazi groups. Hamas identifies with that. You're absolutely right. There are a lot of Islamists who look back to the final solution as, a missed opportunity.
The genocide of Jewish people. So I know that there's an organization here in the United States that likes to tag people as being a part of hate groups that you've been writing about this week. They're called the Southern Poverty Law Center. From time to time, their designation of all sorts of Christians as haters, and they're a part of hate groups, has led to even kind of these corporate news outlets, places like Politico, to be like, the SPLC's probably jumped the shark. They're a little over the top with its hate group designations here. What is the SPLC doing this week as it relates to organizations in the United States who are issuing open support for terrorism?
Absolutely nothing. They have remained silent on it. There have been SPLC people out there talking about, well, let's face it, they don't say we support Hamas, but they do talk about, how Israelis are colonizers. And again, you get these are the people who out there push the silence is violence, that we're looking for a trans genocide and, white supremacy. But when push comes to shove, they're perfectly fine with actual Nazis out there pushing for a second Holocaust. Just as, I wrote about this morning. The United Nations, they run the schools in Gaza. And there's a video that I linked in one of my posts today. I think it was my first one, where there are students in these schools saying, here's what we're being taught. And it's about how they ought to become martyrs, how Jews need to be killed and they deserve what they got. And so that's the United Nations. Trump, and I've had my disagreements with Trump, but he cut off funds for that kind of education, in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And one of the very first things that Joe Biden did was reinstate that funding.
Gross.
And it's all about hate.
And we're funding it. It's just disgusting.
Yeah.
It's totally disgusting. The SPLC isn't just a random organization that affixes hate labels and then apparently ignores actual hate. It's an organization with actual ruling class power. I'm reminded of Amazon's decision to partner with the SPLC, to rely on the SPLC to decide who is an acceptable charity and who's not. For what was once, they had a program for a while called Amazon Smile, where basically every purchase you made, you could also cough up a couple coins to whatever charity you wanted to support. The SPLC had a veto power over what charities were allowed in the program, and this is typical. It's true of these other big tech companies. They all come along and they all kind of genuflect before the SPLC and say, "Hey, whatever you want goes." And boy, they represent some very destructive ideologies, don't they?
Yeah, big tech follows the lead of the SPLC. I mean, a lot of the censorship that goes on at Facebook and used to go on at Twitter and all the social media outlets has been driven by what the SPLC either gives the seal of approval to or calls a hate group. And so they have tremendous power to shape what you and I see out there. What is in the Overton window, acceptable opinions that can be spread out there. And it's quite clear. I mean, an acceptable opinion is anything that is anti-Western, anti-white, and an unacceptable opinion is any kind of critique of the left. I mean, it's just the way that it is. And really our entire cultural elite, a good chunk of our political elite, and most of the mainstream media has bought into an ideology that really is about the destruction of Western culture. They're pro-censorship. They're, selectively pro-terrorism. I mean, think of all the damage that was done by the BLM riots in 2020, and there was 100% approval of that. Our public health establishment, they came out and said, you cannot protest anything except if you're going out and doing the George Floyd stuff. And then it's good for public health to do that. I mean, we really have to recognize how fundamentally corrupt many of our institutions are, starting with academia, but really going through the mainstream media all the way down to, the local news.
And it goes back to what you said. It goes back to what you said a few minutes ago. It's Marxism. I mean, even the founders of Black Lives Matter, they all have bragged in a public way about how they got all of their foundations in Marxism. So this week, it should come as no surprise. It doesn't to this audience. They're not surprised at all to see BLM chapters endorsing Hamas's terror attack on Israel this week across our country. I guess the only upside to this, to the extent that you can detect a silver lining, is that you're seeing people begin to wake up to what's happening to their country, and hopefully it's enough to help turn things around, David.
Yeah, well, I mean, people think we're talking about a Red Scare here, but the president of the American Library Association went to a conference, the Socialism 2023 conference, and said her goal is to create libraries out there whose mission it is to do Marxist indoctrination. That is the goal. And really, if you go back and look, the intellectual roots of this go back to the 1960s when the left finally realized that there wasn't going to be a proletarian revolution. And they actually put together a plan called the Long March Through the Institutions, which was take over institutions one by one, shape them, and essentially do a revolution from within. And that's what every DEI program is all about. That's what they have done in the public schools. That is what they have done in academia, which is where they started it, up to now, the point where, Harvard University can't choke out something as simple as Hamas is a group of terrorists, and what they did was wrong. It's just shocking. And I know people, my father, for instance, has thought for years that I'm absolutely nuts talking about these things. And, the scales came off of his eyes. We just had an argument about Israel. And, he said, I expect better from Jews. And then 3 days later, you get Hamas coming out. And it's like, oh, I get it.
Amazing. It's just amazing. And it's unfortunate that it has to take something like that to begin to wake people up. But But hopefully it holds. Hopefully the change of heart and the recognition of what's happening in our country holds. David Strom, thank you very much. Appreciate your work and your time as always, sir, over at Hot Air. Thank you very much.